My husband left me alone during emergency surgery. Business dinner, he texted. His mother said I was overreacting. I woke up hours later, stitches fresh, pain numb, and the surgeon was holding an envelope. He said, "A lady told me to give you this. If he didn't show up." I opened it slowly. The pain hit me like lightning, splitting through my abdomen as I collapsed onto our kitchen floor, my wedding ring scraping against the cold tile. 6 years of marriage, and I was calling out Eric's name to empty walls while my vision blurred and my body convulsed in agony. "Eric." I gasped, but he'd already left for his evening jog. The same predictable routine he'd maintained for 3 years, headphones in, world shut out. I fumbled for my phone with trembling fingers, each movement sending fresh waves of fire through my core. The ambulance dispatcher's voice seemed to echo from underwater as I whispered our address between ragged breaths. Before we continue, I want to thank you for joining me in sharing these stories that matter. If you believe that women deserve partners who show up during their darkest moments, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this betrayal unfolds. For weeks, I'd been telling Eric something was wrong. The stabbing pains that woke me at night, the nausea that made me rush from important dinners, the exhaustion that left me hollow-eyed and shaking. "You're stressed," he'd said, not even looking up from his laptop. "Maybe see a therapist. This anxiety thing is getting old, Christina." His mother had been worse. "Some women just dramatize everything," she told him over Sunday dinner while I sat right there, fork halfway to my mouth. My generation didn't have time for all these mysterious ailments. But this wasn't anxiety. This was my appendix rupturing, flooding my body with poison while I lay alone on our anniversary tile, the expensive Italian marble Eric had insisted on because it added value to our investment. The paramedics found me conscious but barely coherent, vital signs dropping fast. "Ma'am, we need to get you to surgery immediately," the younger one said, his face grim as he checked my pulse. "This is life-threatening. Is there someone we can call?" "My husband," I whispered, giving them Eric's number as they loaded me onto the stretcher. The sirens wailed as we raced through the city streets, but all I could think about was how Eric would react. Would he panic? Drop everything? Finally realized that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the dramatic wife his mother painted me as? The emergency room was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and urgent voices. "Acute appendicitis with perforation," I heard someone say. "We need to get her prepped now." A nurse leaned over me, her expression kind but professional. "Honey, we're trying to reach your husband. The surgery can't wait, but we'll keep calling." I wanted to tell her not to bother. Deep down, in that place where wives keep their most painful truths, I already knew he wouldn't come. Eric had perfected the art of convenient absence over the years, missing my father's funeral because of a crucial client meeting, skipping my birthday dinner for a golf tournament, arriving 3 hours late to my college reunion because he lost track of time. But this was different. This was life and death. They wheeled me into pre-op, where the anesthesiologist explained the risks in a gentle voice that made everything feel surreal. "Your husband will be here when you wake up," the nurse assured me, squeezing my hand. I nodded, wanting to believe her, needing to believe that after 6 years of marriage Eric would choose me over whatever else demanded his attention. My phone buzzed once as they prepared to take me into surgery. One message. My heart actually lifted. Maybe he was racing here, maybe he'd gotten the calls, maybe. "Can't come. Business dinner. Handle it." 8 words. 8 words to dismiss the fact that his wife was about to go under the knife, alone, while her body fought a potentially fatal infection. 8 words that somehow managed to be both cruel and casual, like he was declining an invitation to coffee rather than abandoning his spouse during a medical emergency. The surgical team saw my face crumble. They saw the tears that finally came, hot and bitter, as the reality crashed over me. The anesthesiologist gently took my phone and set it aside. "We're going to take excellent care of you," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." But I wasn't okay. As the anesthesia pulled me under, my last conscious thought wasn't about the surgery or the pain or even the fear of dying. It was the crushing realization that I had married a man who could reduce my life-threatening emergency to an inconvenience he could simply text away. While I fought for my life on the operating table, Eric was probably ordering wine and discussing quarterly projections, my crisis already forgotten. The business dinner. Always the business dinner. It was his escape hatch from every uncomfortable moment, every emotional demand, every instance where being a husband required more than his minimum effort. Hours later, when I first opened my eyes in recovery, the silence confirmed what I already knew. No flowers. No worried face hovering over me. No hand holding mine. Just the steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell of a hospital room where I'd nearly died alone. The nurse checked my vitals with practiced efficiency. "Your surgery went perfectly," she said warmly. "You're going to make a full recovery. Your husband hasn't arrived yet, but—" "He's not coming," I whispered, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube. The words tasted like truth, bitter, final, and somehow liberating. She paused, her expression shifting to something deeper than professional sympathy. "I'm sorry, honey. Some people just don't understand what really matters." But I was beginning to understand. As I lay there in that sterile room, fresh stitches pulling at my skin and pain medication dulling the edges, I finally saw our marriage clearly. Eric hadn't just failed me tonight. He'd been failing me for years, one convenient absence at a time. And somewhere in that moment of absolute clarity, something inside me shifted. The woman who had begged for his attention, who had made excuses for his coldness, who had accepted crumbs of affection like they were feast, she was dying on that hospital bed. What would wake up in her place was something entirely different. 3 days passed in a haze of morphine and broken sleep. Nurses came and went like ghosts, checking my vitals, adjusting my speaking in hushed tones about my remarkable recovery. But recovery from what? The physical wound was healing, sure, but something deeper had torn open that no surgeon could stitch closed. I kept expecting Eric to walk through that door with his sheepish smile and some elaborate excuse. Maybe he'd bring those overpriced roses from the fancy florist downtown, the ones he bought whenever his guilt finally outweighed his indifference. Maybe he'd sit beside my bed and hold my hand the way husbands do in movies, whispering apologies and promises to be better. But the door remained closed. My phone stayed silent. On the 4th morning, I woke to find Dr. Martinez standing beside my bed, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something I couldn't quite read. He held a manila envelope in his hands, turning it over slowly like he was weighing whether to give it to me. "How are you feeling today, Christina?" he asked, but his eyes kept drifting to the envelope. "Better," I lied, struggling to sit up straighter. "When can I go home?" "Soon. Your incision is healing beautifully and your white cell count is back to normal." He paused, then looked directly at me. "Has your husband been by yet?" The question hit like a physical blow. "No. He's busy with work." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. "Christina, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Are you safe at home?" Safe. The word felt foreign in my mouth. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes when family members don't show up during medical emergencies, it's because—" He trailed off, choosing his words carefully. "It's because the relationship isn't what it appears to be from the outside." I stared at him, confused. "Dr. Martinez, my husband isn't violent. He's just absent." "Absence can be its own form of cruelty," he said quietly. Then he held up the envelope. "A woman came by yesterday. She was very specific about when I should give this to you. She said, and I quote, 'Only if he doesn't show up.'" My heart started racing, the monitor beside my bed betraying my sudden anxiety. "What woman?" "I don't understand." "She didn't give her name. Elegant lady, maybe mid-30s, blonde hair. He seemed to know you though. Or at least she seemed to know your situation." He extended the envelope toward me. "She paid your entire hospital bill, Christina. Everything. The surgery, the medications, the room charges. It's all covered." I took the envelope with trembling hands. My name was written across the front in careful script, but beneath it someone had written, "For when you're ready to see the truth." "Did she say anything else?" I whispered. "She said you'd understand once you read it. And she said to tell you that you're stronger than you think." Dr. Martinez squeezed my shoulder gently. "I'll give you some privacy." After he left, I sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the envelope. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to pretend this strange woman and her mysterious message didn't exist. But another part of me, the part that had been slowly awakening since Eric's abandonment, needed to know what was inside. With shaking fingers, I tore open the seal. The The first thing I saw made my breath catch. A photograph of Eric, but not the Eric I knew. This Eric was younger, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, wearing a tuxedo I'd never seen. He was smiling that devastating smile that had first attracted me to him, but his arm was around a woman who wasn't me. She was beautiful, blonde, sophisticated, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that reached them. She wore a wedding dress, and her hand displayed a ring that looked suspiciously like mine, only older, more vintage. Beneath the photo was a hospital bill with "paid in full" stamped across it in red ink. But it wasn't my bill. It was for someone named Skylar Whitmore, dated 4 years ago. Extensive neurological procedures, months of intensive care rehabilitation services. The same last name Eric had when I met him. My hands shook as I unfolded the letter beneath everything else. The handwriting was the same elegant script from the envelope's front. Dear Christina, you don't know me, but I was his wife before you. My name is Skylar. If you're reading this, it means Eric has done to you what he did to me. Abandoned you when you needed him most. I'm sorry. I'm sorry because I know exactly how that feels and I know exactly what comes next. You're probably confused right now. Maybe you're telling yourself this is some mistake, some cruel joke. I thought the same thing when I first realized what kind of man I'd married. But you're not crazy and you're not overreacting. You're just finally seeing clearly. I know about the business dinners that run late. I know about the important clients who always seem to need him on holidays. I know about his mother's comments about dramatic women and anxiety disorders. I know because I lived it too. I also know about the joint bank account he's been slowly draining. The life insurance policy he increased right before you got sick. The private conversations he's been having with his lawyer about protecting assets in case of medical expenses. Christina, I need you to understand something. What happened to you wasn't an emergency to him. It was an opportunity. I stopped reading, my vision blurring with tears that weren't from pain medication. The letter fluttered in my hands as the full meaning of her words sank in. He hadn't just abandoned me. He'd been planning for this moment, preparing for it. While I lay in surgery fighting for my life, Eric had been calculating how my potential death might benefit him financially. The woman in the photo, Skylar, had been through this exact same scenario. And somehow she'd survived to warn me. But how? And why now? I looked at the photo again, studying her face more carefully. There was something familiar about her eyes, something that made me think I'd seen her before. Recently. Then it hit me like a physical blow. The woman who'd been in the hospital elevator 3 days ago, the one who'd smiled at me with such knowing sadness. The woman who'd held the door and said, "Take care of yourself, honey. You're stronger than you know." It had been her. Skylar. Eric's first wife. The wife who was supposed to be dead. My fingers trembled as I turned to the second page of Skylar's letter, desperate to understand how a dead woman could be walking hospital corridors and paying my medical bills. I suppose you're wondering how I'm writing this letter when Eric told everyone I died 4 years ago. The truth is both simpler and more devastating than you might imagine. We were married 9 years ago in the same church where you probably had your ceremony. Eric has a pattern, he even recycled the same vows, the same honeymoon destination, probably the same promises about growing old together. That first year was magical. He was attentive, romantic, everything I'd dreamed of in a husband. He called me his angel, and promised to love me in sickness and in health. Then something changed. It started small, forgotten anniversaries, cancelled dates, that distant look in his eyes when I spoke about my day. By year 2 he'd mastered the art of being physically present but emotionally absent. Sound familiar? The headaches began during our 3rd year. At first they were manageable, just occasional migraines that Eric dismissed as stress from my job at the art gallery. "You're working too hard, Skylar," he'd say, barely looking up from his phone. "Maybe you should quit and focus on being a wife." But the headaches got worse. Blinding pain that left me curled up in our bedroom with blackout curtains drawn. Then came the memory lapses, the dizzy spells, the moments where I'd forget where I was or why I was holding car keys. Eric's response was predictable. "You're being dramatic. Everyone gets headaches." Even when I started collapsing, actually hitting the floor unconscious, he found ways to minimize it. "Skylar's always been high maintenance," I heard him tell his mother over the phone. "Some women just need more attention than others." The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Arteriovenous malformation in my brain. A tangle of abnormal blood vessels that could rupture at any moment. The neurologist explained it in terms that made Eric's face go white. Major surgery required, months of recovery, no guarantees about cognitive function afterward. How much will this cost? Was Eric's first question. Not, will she be okay? Not, what are her chances? Just dollars and cents. The surgery was scheduled for the following month. Eric seemed supportive, asking the right questions, holding my hand during consultations. I actually believed he was scared of losing me. What I didn't know was that he'd already contacted a divorce attorney. 3 days before my surgery, he increased my life insurance policy to $500,000. He told me it was just being responsible in case something happened. I signed the papers gratefully, thinking how thoughtful he was to protect our future. I never made it to the scheduled surgery. The malformation ruptured while I was alone in our kitchen, making Eric's favorite dinner as a surprise. I collapsed exactly where you probably collapsed, Christina. The same tiles, the same desperate reaching for a phone, the same husband who wasn't there when I needed him most. But unlike you, I didn't wake up in a few days. I fell into what doctors call a minimally responsive state. Not quite a coma, not quite conscious. I was trapped inside my own body for 4 years and 4 months, aware but unable to move, speak, or signal that I was still in there. Eric visited exactly 3 times. Once to sign papers transferring our joint accounts into his name alone. For medical expenses, he told the staff. Once to authorize moving me from the expensive private facility to a state-run long-term care facility. And once to file for divorce on grounds of mental incapacitation. The nurses didn't know I could hear them discussing it. Poor woman, one said. Her husband says she wouldn't want to live like this. He's already planning the funeral. But I wasn't dying. I was listening, burning, understanding exactly who I'd married. He sold our house 6 months after my collapse. Told neighbors I was deteriorating rapidly, and that keeping it was too painful. The money went into accounts I couldn't access, investments I'd never agreed to, a new car I'd never ride in. 18 months later he met you at some charity function. I know because he actually brought you to see me once, early in your relationship. You probably don't remember. I was just another sad case in a long-term care ward. But you were kind to the nurses, gentle with the elderly patients in wheelchairs. You had no idea you were meeting your predecessor. This is why I value life so much, Eric told you as we left my room. Seeing Skylar like this makes me appreciate every healthy day. He was using my tragedy as a pickup line, Christina. Creating sympathy to make himself seem deeper, more sensitive. 2 years after that visit he married you. I knew because the nurses talked about seeing his picture in the society pages. Didn't his wife just die? One asked. Guess he moved on quickly, another replied. Except I hadn't died. I was very much alive, just trapped in a body that wouldn't obey my commands. The day I woke up, really woke up, was a Tuesday just like the day I got my diagnosis. 4 years and 4 months after my collapse, my eyes opened and stayed open. My fingers moved when I told them to. My voice, hoarse from disuse, actually made sounds. The staff was amazed. They called it a miracle, a 1 in a million recovery. But the first thing I asked for wasn't water or food or even a mirror to see how I'd changed. I asked for a computer. Within hours I'd discovered the truth. Divorced while unconscious. Assets transferred. House sold. Husband remarried to a woman named Christina who looked remarkably like me, just younger and more trusting. You might expect me to tell you I was furious, that I screamed and raged and planned immediate revenge. But lying motionless for over 4 years teaches you patience. It teaches you that emotions are luxuries and survival requires strategy. So I began watching. Learning about you, about your marriage, about the patterns Eric was already repeating. I saw the same distance in his eyes during your public appearances. I recognized the way he checked his phone when you spoke. I knew it was only a matter of time before he did to you what he'd done to me. The only question was whether you'd survive it. I set the letter down, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the pages. Skylar hadn't just been Eric's wife, she'd been his victim, discarded like garbage when she became inconvenient. And now I was living her exact same nightmare, just with different details. But she'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, she'd clawed her way back from the edge of death to warn me. The question was, what did she expect me to do about it? I turned to the final page of Skylar's letter with trembling fingers, needing to understand how a woman in a long-term care facility could orchestrate anything, let alone whatever was unfolding around my marriage. By now you're probably wondering how someone who spent 4 years motionless could possibly help you. The answer has a name: Riley Morrison. Riley was my best friend before Eric, during Eric, and thankfully after Eric. She visited me every single week during those 4 years and 4 months when I couldn't respond, couldn't acknowledge her presence, couldn't even squeeze her hand to let her know I heard her voice. She read to me, played music, and most importantly, she promised she'd make things right if I ever woke up. Riley is a corporate attorney, brilliant, methodical, and absolutely ruthless when someone she loves has been wronged. She's also beautiful in that understated way that makes men feel like they've discovered a hidden treasure. Soft-spoken, kind eyes, the type of woman who listens intently and makes men feel like the most interesting person in the room. In other words, she's Eric's perfect target. 3 months after I woke up, Riley and I began planning. Not revenge, that's too emotional, too chaotic. We planned justice, and justice requires precision. Riley spent weeks studying Eric's patterns, his habits, his weaknesses. She discovered he attended monthly gallery openings downtown, always alone, always working the room for potential business connections. He'd grown lazy since marrying you, Christina. Comfortable. Predictable. The Morrison Gallery opening in March was perfect. Riley arranged to be there as a friend of the artist, looking stunning in a simple black dress that cost more than most people's rent. She positioned herself near the wine table, knowing Eric would gravitate toward the expensive champagne. He approached her within 20 minutes. "I haven't seen you at these events before," he said, using the same line he'd probably used on you. Riley played her role perfectly. Interested but not desperate, intelligent but not threatening, successful but not intimidating. "I'm new to the city," she lied smoothly. "Just started at Hartwell and Associates." She named a prestigious law firm, knowing it would intrigue him. "I'm still learning about all the cultural opportunities here." Eric's eyes lit up. A beautiful, successful woman who was new to town and didn't know anyone? It was like Christmas morning for a serial cheater. They talked for an hour. Riley listened to his complaints about work stress, nodded sympathetically when he mentioned his complicated home situation, and skillfully extracted information about his business, his finances, his daily routine. By the end of the evening, he'd asked for her number. "I'd love to show you more of the city," he said, already mentally planning how to juggle his new conquest with his existing wife. Riley accepted graciously, then went home and reported every detail to me. We refined our strategy based on what we'd learned. Eric was even more predictable than we'd hoped. Their first date was coffee 2 weeks later. Riley chose a cafe across town from our neighborhood, somewhere you'd never accidentally see them. She dressed down, jeans, a simple sweater, minimal makeup. She wanted to seem approachable, not like the sophisticated attorney she actually was. Eric arrived 15 minutes late, testing whether she'd wait. She did, because women who don't wait don't become long-term mistresses. He apologized with flowers, grocery store roses, not even the expensive ones, and launched into complaints about his marriage. "My wife doesn't understand the pressure I'm under," he confided over coffee. "She's so demanding, always needing attention, always having some crisis or another." Riley nodded sympathetically. "That sounds exhausting. You deserve someone who appreciates how hard you work." It was exactly what he wanted to hear. Within a month they were meeting twice a week. Eric told you these were client dinners or networking events. Riley documented every lie, every excuse, every detail of their encounters. But she wasn't just gathering evidence. She was becoming indispensable to him. "You're so different from other women," Eric told her during their second month of meetings. "You actually listen. You understand what it's like to have real responsibilities." Riley smiled and touched his hand across the restaurant table. "I just think successful men deserve partners who support their ambitions instead of creating more stress." By month 3, Eric was completely hooked. He started making increasingly bold statements about his future, about what he wanted from life, about the changes he was considering. "Sometimes I think about what life would be like if I could start over," he mused during one of their dinner dates. "Without all the baggage and complications." "What's stopping you?" Riley asked innocently. "Legal issues. Financial entanglements. My wife's name is on everything." He paused, studying Riley's face. "But I've been thinking about restructuring some things, protecting my assets in case." "In case what?" in case she has another medical emergency. Hospital bills can bankrupt you these days. Riley's expression remained neutral, but inside she was documenting every callous word. Eric wasn't just planning to abandon me like he'd abandoned Skylar. He was actively hoping for an opportunity to do it. That's when Riley suggested estate planning. You know, as an attorney, I see people get blindsided by medical crises all the time, she said casually. Have you considered setting up power of attorney arrangements? Trust structures? There are ways to protect your assets that most people never think about. Eric's interest was immediate and intense. Could you help with something like that? I shouldn't really mix business with whatever this is, Riley said, perfectly playing reluctant. But I care about you. Maybe I could review some documents, make sure you're protected. Within 2 weeks, Eric had signed papers giving Riley limited power of attorney for emergency financial decisions. He thought he was being clever, setting up a safety net in case you became a financial liability like Skylar had been. He had no idea he'd just handed control of his entire financial life to the best friend of the woman he'd tried to erase from existence. The beauty of Riley's plan wasn't just that it was legal. It was that Eric had volunteered for every step. He'd pursued her, confided in her, asked for her help, and signed documents giving her access to everything he owned. He thought he was preparing to abandon his second wife. Instead, he was preparing to lose everything to his first wife's best friend. And the most beautiful part? While Eric was busy planning my potential financial ruin, I was at home recovering from surgery, completely unaware that my salvation was already in motion. I stared at the letter, my mind reeling. While I'd been lying in this hospital bed feeling abandoned and betrayed, a carefully orchestrated plan had been unfolding around Eric. He wasn't just a neglectful husband. He was actively plotting against me the same way he'd plotted against Skylar. But unlike Skylar, I wouldn't be facing this alone. I had an ally I'd never even met. The envelope contained one more item I hadn't noticed. A small card with an address and a time. Café Luna, tomorrow 2 p.m. Come alone. I was discharged the next morning with strict instructions to rest and avoid stress. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in my Uber, clutching Skylar's letter and heading toward what felt like the most stressful moment of my life. But I had to know. I had to meet the woman who'd been playing chess with my husband while I'd been playing house. Café Luna was a small, intimate place tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing shop. I spotted her immediately, not because I recognized her but because she was the only woman sitting alone who looked like she was waiting for someone specific. She was exactly as Skylar had described. Beautiful in an understated way, with intelligent eyes and an aura of quiet confidence. Riley Morrison looked up as I approached, and her smile was both warm and knowing. "Christina," she said softly, standing to embrace me like we were old friends. "I'm so glad you came." "You're her," I whispered, studying her face. "You're the one who's been having coffee dates with your husband." "Yes." She gestured to the chair across from her. Though I prefer to think of it as professional consultation. I sat down heavily, my surgical incision pulling slightly. "I don't understand any of this. How do you know Skylar? How long have you been planning whatever this is?" Riley's expression grew serious. "Skylar and I have been best friends since law school. I was her maid of honor when she married Eric. I was also the one who found her collapsed in her apartment when Eric was conveniently out of town on business." She paused to sip her coffee, and I noticed her hands were perfectly steady while mine were trembling. "I visited her every week for 4 years, Christina. Every single week, I sat beside her bed and promised her that if she ever woke up, I'd make sure Eric never did this to another woman." "But she did wake up," I said, still struggling to process everything. "She did. And the first thing she asked me to do was watch you. Protect you. Because we both knew it was only a matter of time before Eric showed his true colors again." My phone buzzed with a text message. Eric's name flashed on the screen and I felt my stomach clench. Riley noticed my reaction. "He's been trying to reach you all morning, hasn't he?" she asked. I nodded, reading his message. "Where are you? Need to talk." "Important." "He's panicking," Riley said with satisfaction. "Because as of this morning, Eric Whitmore has no access to any of his accounts, his investments, or his assets. Everything is frozen pending investigation into financial fraud." "What?" I stared at her. "How is that possible?" Because 3 months ago, your husband voluntarily signed documents giving me power of attorney over his financial affairs. He thought he was being clever, setting up protections in case you became a financial burden like Skylar had been. Riley's smile was sharp. He had no idea he was signing his entire life over to someone who'd been planning his downfall for years. My phone rang. Eric's name again. This time I answered. Christina, where the hell are you? His voice was tight with panic. Something's wrong with our accounts. I can't access anything. The bank says there's some kind of legal hold. I'm having coffee, I said calmly, meeting Riley's approving gaze. With a friend. What friend? You don't have any friends I don't know about. The possessiveness in his voice was suddenly crystal clear to me. How had I never noticed it before? Her name is Riley Morrison. Perhaps you know her. The silence on the other end was deafening. When Eric finally spoke, his voice was different. Calculating, dangerous. Christina, I don't know what someone has told you, but you need to come home right now. We need to talk. About what, Eric? About how you left me alone during emergency surgery. About your business dinner that was more important than your wife's life? Or maybe about Skylar. Another silence. Longer this time. I don't know what lies you've been told. Lies. I laughed, and the sound surprised me with its bitterness. Is it a lie that you divorced your first wife while she was unconscious? Is it a lie that you've been planning to do the same thing to me? Christina, listen to me very carefully. His voice had gone cold. Whatever this woman has told you, whatever documents she's shown you, none of it matters. You're my wife. Everything I own is half yours. Come home and we'll sort this out together. Riley was writing something on a napkin. She slid it across to me. Check your account. I put Eric on speaker and opened my banking app. My personal account, which had contained $3,000 when I went into surgery, now showed a balance of $247,000. How? I whispered. Riley wrote another note. Skylar's settlement from the insurance company. She never spent a penny of it. Christina? Christina, are you there? Eric's voice was getting frantic. I'm here, I said, staring at the number on my screen. I'm just looking at my bank account. It's very interesting. What do you mean? I mean, I'm looking at $250,000 that wasn't there yesterday. Money that came from someone who cares more about my well-being than my own husband does. Who gave you money? Christina, this is illegal. Whatever scheme this woman is running. The woman's name is Skylar, Eric. Your first wife. The one who's supposed to be dead. The line went completely quiet. Not even breathing. Finally, Eric spoke and his voice was a whisper. That's impossible. Is it? Because she seems very much alive to me. Alive and angry and apparently very good at long-term planning. Riley gestured for the phone. I hesitated, then handed it to her. Hello, Eric, she said pleasantly. This is Riley Morrison, your attorney of record for all financial matters. I wanted to let you know that we've discovered some irregularities in your asset management that require immediate investigation. You can't do this. Eric's voice was barely controlled rage now. I never gave you permission to. Actually, you did. 3 separate times, in fact. All notarized, all witnessed, all completely legal. You were very thorough about making sure I had complete authority over your finances. In case of emergency. And this is an emergency, Eric. Your wife nearly died while you were having dinner with me. I'd say that qualifies. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, what do you want? Riley looked at me, raising an eyebrow. The question wasn't for her to answer. I took the phone back, and when I spoke my voice was steady and clear. Nothing, Eric. I want absolutely nothing from you. Christina, please. Let's talk about this rationally. I tried talking to you rationally for 6 years. You weren't interested then. I paused, feeling a strange sense of calm settling over me. You left me on that operating table, Eric. You chose a business dinner over your wife's life. So now I'm choosing myself over our marriage. You can't just. Actually, I can. And I am. I looked at Riley, who nodded encouragingly. You left me with nothing when I needed you most. Now I'm leaving you with nothing when you need me most. I hung up the phone and immediately blocked his number. For the first time in 6 years, the silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. Riley reached across the cafe table and squeezed my hand. There's someone who's been waiting a very long time to meet you properly, she said gently. Are you ready? 20 minutes later, we pulled into the driveway of a modest but elegant townhouse in the historic district. The garden was meticulously maintained with late-blooming roses climbing a white trellis by the front door. It was the kind of home that spoke of quiet strength and careful rebuilding. Skylar opened the door before we could knock. In person, she was more striking than her photograph had suggested. The years had marked her. There were lines around her eyes that spoke of pain survived and battles fought, but she carried herself with a dignity that was almost regal. When she smiled, I saw traces of the woman Eric had fallen in love with, but also something harder, more resilient. Christina, she said, and her voice was exactly as I'd imagined it from her letter, warm but measured. I'm so glad you're safe. We embraced on her doorstep, two women who had shared the same nightmare, the same man, the same devastating realization that the person we trusted most had been planning our destruction. Her home was a sanctuary. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, walls lined with books and artwork that spoke of a life carefully reconstructed. She led us to a dining room where a simple lunch was waiting. Soup, fresh bread, tea served in delicate china cups. I hope you don't mind, Skylar said as we sat down. I thought we should meet somewhere peaceful. We've all been through enough chaos. For the first few minutes, we ate in comfortable silence. There was something profound about sharing a meal with these women. One who had saved me, one who had avenged us both, and me, still processing the magnitude of what had unfolded. How long have you been planning this? Finally asked. 4 years, 4 months, and 16 days, Skylar replied without hesitation. From the moment I woke up and learned what Eric had done. But the real planning started when Riley told me he'd married again. Riley set down her teacup carefully. We knew he'd repeat the pattern. Men like Eric don't change, they just find new victims. The question was whether we could intervene before he destroyed another life. Your medical emergency accelerated our timeline, Skylar continued. When Riley told me you'd collapsed and Eric hadn't shown up, we knew it was time to act. I looked between them, these two remarkable women who had orchestrated Eric's downfall with surgical precision. What happens now? Skylar stood and walked to an antique desk in the corner. She returned with a thick folder of legal documents. Now we divide what's rightfully ours. The documents were comprehensive. Property deeds, investment portfolios, bank statements, insurance policies. Everything Eric had accumulated during both marriages, meticulously catalogued and legally transferred. The house you shared with him, Skylar said, sliding a deed across the table. It's yours now. He took my home when I couldn't defend it. You shouldn't lose yours because of his choices. But the investment portfolio we built during my marriage, she continued, indicating another set of papers. Split 3 ways. Riley earned her share through her legal work and emotional labor. You earned yours by surviving him. Riley added her own documents to the pile. His car, his boat, his golf club membership, all transferred legally through the power of attorney he signed. Everything he used to impress other women while neglecting his wives. I stared at the papers, overwhelmed. This is too much. I can't accept. Christina, Skylar's voice was firm but kind. Eric stole 4 years of my life. He planned to steal yours. We're not taking anything that wasn't built on our backs, our sacrifices, our love that he exploited. He was right. Every asset on that table had been purchased with money Eric had earned while we supported him, managed his household, entertained his clients, played the role of devoted wives while he planned our destruction. Riley's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled grimly. Eric's mother just tried to call him. When he didn't answer, she called his office. Apparently, he's been terminated for misappropriation of company resources. What does that mean? I asked. It means he was using company credit cards to fund his dates with me, Riley explained. His employers discovered the expenses during their investigation into his frozen accounts. Dinner receipts, hotel rooms, jewelry purchases, all charged to the firm while he told them he was courting potential clients. Skylar shook her head. He couldn't even cheat honestly. Over the next hour, we signed documents, notarized transfers, and legally solidified the distribution of Eric's former life. It felt surreal. 3 women sitting around a dining table, calmly dismantling a man's existence with the same methodical precision he'd used to try to dismantle ours. What about Eric? finally asked. What happens to him now? Riley consulted her phone again. His credit cards have been canceled. His lease on that downtown apartment he thought we didn't know about has been terminated. His lawyer dropped him when the retainer check bounced. His family. Funny thing about families, Skylar mused. They're very supportive when you're successful and very distant when you're not. His mother, who called you dramatic for having emergency surgery, hasn't returned his calls since the news broke. His brother changed his phone number. As the afternoon sun slanted through Skylar's windows, painting everything in golden light, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Genuine peace. Not the fragile calm of walking on eggshells around Eric's moods, but the deep tranquility that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. There's one more thing, Skylar said, producing a final document. This is a restraining order. Legal protection against any attempt Eric might make to contact you, harass you, or interfere with your new life. I signed it without hesitation. As we prepared to leave, Skylar walked me to the door. Christina, I want you to know something. When Eric abandoned you in that hospital, he thought he was proving your weakness. But walking away from someone who needs you doesn't make you strong. It makes you empty. And empty people lose everything eventually. Riley joined us on the porch. We didn't do this out of spite or revenge, she said quietly. We did it because women who survive men like Eric need to stick together. We need to show other women that there's another way. 6 months later, I would learn that Eric was working at a gas station outside the city, living in a studio apartment with furniture from thrift stores. His name had become cautionary tale in our social circles. A warning about men who view wives as disposable assets rather than partners. But that afternoon, standing on Skylar's porch with the 2 women who had saved my life in ways I was still discovering, I wasn't thinking about Eric at all. I was thinking about the future, my future, for the first time in years. They thought we were weak because we loved them, Skylar said as we stood in her garden, 3 women who had survived the same predator and emerged stronger. But love doesn't make you weak. It makes you patient. She paused, looking at both Riley and me with eyes that held all the wisdom of someone who had literally fought her way back from the dead. And patient women win differently. If this story of strategic justice had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Christina hung up on Eric after saying, "You left me on the table, now I'm leaving you with nothing." What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more empowering stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.